going to be sharing Braxton's birth story with you. He was our first baby, and he is currently 6.5 years old. So I have had to write notes down. I've gone over all my birth notes again, and my husband and I have talked and gone back over our memories of the situation, and I have written things down, so hopefully I can relay it to you the best I remember. So I'll start at the beginning. It took us 7 months of trying to actually conceive Braxton. So we conceived him on the 8th month. Very textbook pregnancy. I had no morning sickness, no spotting, nothing really like that. It was all pretty much textbook to a T. From about 30 weeks, I started getting quite bad edema. So if you don't know what that is, that's swelling, a lot of fluid, pitting. So when you'd push on it, it would make a big indent. So I was getting watched for that because obviously that is a preeclampsia symptom, but you need a lot more to actually be diagnosed with preeclampsia. So I had that from about 30 weeks. When I started hitting 37 weeks, my blood pressure started going really high. I started getting protein in my urine. So at my 38-week appointment with my midwife, I had a lot of protein in my urine. My blood pressure was quite high and I did have edema still. So we decided to do some blood tests just to check if I did have preeclampsia or not. Those tests came back borderline. So I needed to do a 24-hour urine collection. So pretty much they gave me 2 big milk jugs, and I think they were like 3 litres each. And every time I went to the bathroom, I needed to wee into a container and then pour it into the milk jugs. So I had to collect for 24 hours and then they sent that all off to be tested. The results from that came back and they were still fine. They showed that my kidneys and everything was still functioning well. I just had to be closely monitored. I was also given forms to go for a growth scan, and for some reason, I honestly cannot remember why, but I didn't go for it. It wasn't I didn't want to go, it was I just didn't go. I did not go for the growth scans, but I was just still continually getting monitored quite closely. So my appointments went to 2 a week rather than just the standard 1. And when I got to, I think I was like 39 plus 4, my midwife referred me up to the hospital doctors to talk to the obstetricians up there and with her, and we decided that if baby hadn't arrived by 41 weeks, I would need to be induced. Just given the situation with the preeclampsia symptom, it was safer. It was safer to be induced rather than wait too long. So that was set to be done at 41 weeks exactly. I met with her again at 40 weeks exactly, and we just did our normal checkups. Everything was still stable. I still had a lot of swelling, but I was feeling fine. I wasn't feeling worried about it. My headaches had sort of subsided, so we were pretty much happy to continue. She did offer me a stretch and sweep, which at that point I refused. I think it was because being my first baby, I didn't really know much about it, and the research I had done, it sounded more painful rather than anything, and it looked as though it was quite normal for first-time mums to go overdue with their first baby. So I thought we'll just see what happens. As we got closer to 41 weeks, then I would look at stretch and sweeps and intervening and stuff like that. So my due date came and went. No sign of the baby at all. I was having no Braxton Hicks. I was having absolutely no signs of what I had read labor would be like. I had, like I said, no Braxton Hicks, no TMI, discharge, nothing like that, no bloody show. So I thought I was good to go. So at 40 plus 2, my mum actually was having a dinner party out at her house. At the time, she lived about half an hour from where we lived, so it was about 40 minutes to the nearest hospital. That was okay because I hadn't had any signs of this baby actually wanting to come out. But we headed out there early in the morning because it was really hot and they had a swimming pool. So we thought we'd go out there early, chill by the pool for the day and just have a really relaxed day. Sometime that afternoon, I recall we were all sitting outside at the outside table, and Mum had these chairs that had like cushions on them, and they were grey in colour. And we were all sitting around outside chatting and talking to each other. And I got up because I needed to go to the toilet, and I noticed that where I was sitting was sopping wet. Like there was just this big pile of water, and I was like, what? I was like, did my waters break? Because I would have expected to feel something. But mum thought because it had been raining the night before, she wondered if water had just collected in the cushion, and because I had been sitting on it, it had brought it up to the top. But I thought I would call my midwife anyway and just let her know what was going on. She advised me to put on a pad and pretty much just go about the day, because I was at a point where obviously I was overdue. So if baby wanted to come, baby was going to come. Nothing really came out on the pad, so I didn't think it was my waters, so we just sort of continued on. As we got later into the night, it was about 8 o'clock, and everyone was having fun, laughing, everything like that. But for some reason, I just couldn't get into it. I could not shake the feeling of, I just want to be at home. I, for some reason, just felt I needed to be at home. I wanted to go home. So we stayed for a little bit longer and decided to head home. It was about 9 p.m. So we drove back home, hopped in the shower, got all cleaned up, and then we jumped in bed to watch a movie. And this was at about 10:30 p.m. I remember it was exactly 11 p.m. I just got this almighty pain. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I hunched over, I was holding onto my stomach, and my husband looked at me, he was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I think I need to go to the toilet. Like it literally felt like I had that kind of stomach ache, you know, when you need to run backwards and forwards to the toilet 20 times. So I did, I got up, I tried to go to the toilet, nothing came out, but I did have a little bit of bloody show. And I thought, oh, okay, this is a little bit odd, right? Okay, maybe in the next 24 hours, because I've read, again, doing my research, being a first-time mum, I read that majority of people that lose their mucus plug or have their bloody show, things sort of start to happen after about 24 hours. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe where my body's gearing up to go into labor in the next couple of days. Wrong. I kept having these pains that I had to keep going to the toilet. My husband sort of said to me, no, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I think I just got an upset stomach maybe from dinner. And he said, do you realize that these pains are coming every 5 minutes? Oh, maybe it's Braxton Hicks contractions. Obviously, I hadn't experienced Braxton Hicks contractions before then, so I had no idea what they would feel like or what they were even like. So that's what I started thinking, well, maybe it's Braxton Hicks contractions. So he ended up running me a bath just so I could try and relax a little bit. And I said to him, you know what, you might as well go and get some sleep just in case this isn't Braxton Hicks contractions, like just in case this is it. So I jumped in the bath at around 12:30, but the water sort of intensified it for me. So I all of a sudden was like, yes, no, this is something, this is really hurting, and it's now coming around right around the front and wrapping around my back. So I stayed in the bath as long as I could, but then I decided no. So I got out, I went into the lounge, and I was sort of just laboring in the lounge, rocking on my ball, because I wanted Brendan to try and get as much sleep as possible just in case it was the real deal. At around 2:30, I started getting really anxious. I started getting anxious at the fact that I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't sure if I was in labor and if my waters had broken earlier. So I started getting myself into a little bit of a mental anxiety, bad frame. So I did go and wake up my husband. I said to him, look, I think I want to call my midwife. And my goal was to labor at home until at least 3 to 4 centimeters. So I called her. She was really lovely. She came around and checked me. So she arrived at the house at about 3 a.m. So she came and checked me, and I was 0 centimeters dilated, but I was 80% effaced. So she sort of just stayed, monitored the baby for a little bit, watched a few more contractions, and then she left. She said, you know, it's first time mums, it's going to take a while. It's going to be like 12 hours, 24 hours, blah, 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 blah. So she said, just rest as much as you can in between, which was hard because they were coming every 3 minutes, and just to take it easy and to call her back when I felt it was time to maybe her come back and check me if I think things had stepped up at all. So that was fine. So she left our house at about 3:30. She left our house. And I just continued doing what I was doing, swaying on my ball, drinking some water. There was no way I was getting any sleep in between them. They were coming too fast. So she had only been gone about half an hour. And I said to Brendan, I think she needs to come back. My contractions had bumped right up. I could not talk during them. I was in a lot of pain. And I said to him, something's changed. Something shifted here. I could feel Braxton had moved down. Like I could feel him moving down. Said we need to call her back. So we called her again at 4 a.m. And she was back at our house. She was back at our house by about 4:25, I think it was. And she checked me again. She watched a few contractions first and she was like, definitely think things may have changed a little bit. You may have dilated a centimetre or two. So we'll have a look and then we'll continue labouring. She checked me at about 4:45, I believe it was. And I was 100% effaced and I had dilated to 5 centimetres. So things were happening very, very quickly. So she suggested that we start getting our things together and get organised to head up to the hospital. So the hospital was only about a 10-minute drive from our house. And I tell you what, that was the worst drive of my life. Oh my gosh, it was intense. Labouring in a car is just not great. And at that point, my contractions were about 2 minutes apart. So it was horrendous. We arrived at the hospital just after 6. And because I was wanting to have a water birth, we needed to wait for the right room to become available. So I think we were only waiting maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then we got put into our room. And then obviously I needed to wait for them to fill the tub, and they did want to check me again before I got in. So I was checked at 7 a.m. before I hopped into the tub. The tub was full, ready to go, and I was 7 centimeters dilated. So things were moving super fast. I wasn't getting a break between my contractions. At this point, they were coming like every minute and a half at least. So they let me hop in the bath and I got given some gas because I wanted some pain relief, but I was adamant I didn't want the epidural. So I tried the gas out and the hot water of the tub was amazing, but I was only in there about half an hour, 45 minutes before I had to get out because they were having trouble finding his heartbeat and they wanted to put a Doppler on his head. So back out of the tub we went, onto the bed, which was my worst fear. I did not want to labour in bed. I had absolutely no wish to labour in bed on my back. I thought that could be the worst position to be in. So they got me out, put me on the bed, put the Doppler on his head. I was still at 7 centimetres. I tried labouring on my back for a little while before we then switched onto all fours, and they just lifted up the head of the hospital bed and I was sort of just leaning on that, and every time I got a contraction sort of just swaying on the back of the bed. I was getting huge amounts of pressure in my bum, but because they had only checked me about half an hour beforehand and I was 7 centimetres, they didn't want me to push. So they spoke with the doctor and decided that maybe breaking my waters would be the best thing to do. So we still to this day do not know if I possibly had a hind leak and that's what was on the chair, or if it actually just was rainwater being brung to the surface by me sitting on it. But there was definitely waters there to be broken. When they broke them, I went instantly to 9 centimetres, but my waters were full of meconium, thick meconium. It's that, and I sort of looked down between my legs and all I could see was like brown, dark, black, tarry stuff. It was all over my legs, it was all over the bed. I had no clue what was going on. I had read about meconium, but at that point in time, and that point in labour, my head just wasn't concentrating on that part. So the midwife actually got in another midwife to assist with the birth, obviously, because it was now a high risk situation. The NICU was called and put on standby, and also the obstetrician was aware of what was going on as well. I started pushing about 5 minutes after my waters had broken, so I was still only 9.5 centimetres. It happened really fast. His head came through with the second push, and then they realised that his hand was actually up by his head like this. So his elbow was this way and his hand was on his face like this. And because he was already partway through, he couldn't be pushed back up to fix it. He had to come out like that. And also the cord was wrapped around as well. Things started getting intense very quickly. I recall another midwife ripping up my other leg and just holding it in the air. So I'm still on all fours. One of my legs was getting held out to the side to create more room. And then my midwife sticking both hands inside of me to try and maneuver him, pull his arm down, because he was very stuck. I was pushing and he was not coming past that point. It was horrible. It was a really horrible time. He did finally manage to come out, and I just remember feeling that relief of that final push, feeling him come through, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I have done it. I was like resting my head on the bed. I was over the freaking moon. And then in the next breath, I was like, wait, why isn't he crying? Why is my baby not crying? I looked down between my legs and all I could see was a very blue and purple baby. He wasn't moving at all. He was completely unresponsive. So the midwife obviously yelled to push the emergency button. So on the back of the walls, there's a really big red button. It says emergency. So she told my mum to push it, but my mum was in such a panic that she was like, I don't know what to do. So my friend pretty much shoved her right out the way and slammed the button herself. And literally within about 30 seconds, the room flooded with doctors. There was doctors everywhere. The NICU was in there. Everyone that needed to be there was there. Really quickly, my husband got to cut the cord, and then I honestly remember them picking him up by his feet. Like, everything was happening so fast because obviously it was a really serious situation. But he got taken over to the warmer, the baby station, for the doctors and stuff to work on. At that point, I got flipped back onto my back, and my midwife stayed with me because we needed to deliver the placenta, and I did tear with him, obviously, from her having to go in to try and maneuver him. So they were working on him for a really long time, and my husband was over there with him, and I could see him crying, and I knew it was serious. I knew it was more serious than what I was thinking in my head. And I looked to my best friend to try and get some reassurance, and she also had a huge amount of worry and tears, and I knew it wasn't good. It was not a good situation at all. By that point, my mum had actually run out of the room because she wasn't coping. It was very, very intense, but I knew he was in the best hands. But not hearing your baby cry, even for a minute, feels like a long time. But they were working on Braxton for 9 minutes before I heard his first cry. And the relief from that was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I wanted nothing else in the world. Oh, I'm going to get emotional. I wanted nothing else in the world except for my baby to be okay and to hear that cry. So he got brought over to me at 10 minutes. So 10 minutes after he was born, I got to have him on my chest. He was breathing by himself. He was doing really, really well. He had regained all his colour. He looked a little bit swollen, obviously, from getting stuck, but I finally had him on my chest. I had a 2nd degree tear with Braxton, so not too bad considering the situation. We were traumatized. It was such a scary, scary situation, and for that to be your first birth, it was horrible. It wasn't what I was expecting. It wasn't what I read happened. I wasn't prepared for it. But after 10 minutes, he was brought to me. We were cuddling. Everyone else left, so Brendan and I could just have some time together, have some skin to skin with him. Obviously, he was my first, so I didn't know what a normal sized baby looked like. I didn't know what a small baby looked like. I didn't know what a big baby looked like. To me, he just looked tiny. He looked like a tiny, little, fragile thing. So I would never have guessed how big he actually was. So Braxton Graham Lane was born at 10:26 a.m. on the 3rd of November 2013, weighing in at 10 pounds exactly, and he was 56 centimeters long. So he was large. He was a very large baby. He was an unmedicated birth. I had gas to try and help, and I used water, but otherwise he was natural. He was my first natural baby, and very traumatic experience. But he is healthy and well today, and you would never guess he was a 10-pound baby. He is very tall and lean, but no chunk to him at all. He is skin and bones. There was no long-term side effects of what happened to him, and clearly it wasn't enough to put me off having any more babies, because I went on to have another 3 after that. But it was definitely a scary thing. So deciding to get pregnant again was a scary thing, and it, I believe, traumatized my husband more than it did me. But today Braxton is 6.5 years old, happy child, and we love him to pieces. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for listening to my first birth story. And yeah, if you're new to this channel, go back and watch our other vlogs, find out a bit more about us, what we're about. Thank you to everyone that has been supporting us. Thank you to everyone that watches our vlogs and subscribes, and thank you to everyone that reaches out and either comments or reaches out on Instagram and has a chat with me. It's really cool. I love it. I hope everybody is staying safe out there. We will see you next time in our next vlog. Bye guys.